Chapter 18, slide 12. The annual property tax formula. So we know that the property appraiser starts at the assessed value. That is the value given to us through the TRIM notice every single year, and based on that assessed value, we have to pay taxes. But to the assessed value, we apply certain exemptions, as we have reviewed previously. So after the exemptions, we are left with the taxable value, as we saw in the previous formula. When we have the taxable value, we multiply that by the tax rate, and we said that that will be expressed in mills to get the annual property taxes that we have to pay that year. So in the example that we have on the screen, we have a property that has been assessed for $350,000. And we know that the exemptions that apply to the school are $25,000, an additional $25,000 for city and county, and each district will allow an additional $500 because this individual is blind. The rates are given to us in the example. For the school, we have to pay 7 meals. The city rate is 5 meals, and the county rate is 6 meals. So if we move to the next slide, slide 13, we just apply the formula to come up with the tax due for the year. So we take the taxable, the assessed value first, we subtract the exemptions, and we get a taxable amount. That is true for the 3 districts. Remember that the school district only allows $25,000. But the city and the county allows an additional $25,000. So that's why you see in the example that for a school we have $350,000 minus 25 only, minus 500 because this person is blind. And for the city and the school, it will be $350,000, which is the assessed value, minus a full $50,000 because it's $25,000, the first $25,000 and the second $25,000. And again, each district allows the additional $500 because the person is blind. Once we do the math, we come up with a taxable amount. Now that we have the taxable amount, we apply the rate expressed in meals. Remember to divide the meals by 1,000, and when you have the decimal number, this is when you multiply by the taxable amount, not before. When you get the 3 amounts, the taxes that you have to pay to each district, all you have to do at the end is add up the 3 numbers and you will get a final tax due for the year. I included in the next slide, slide 14, a real tax bill. So if you browse through this tax bill, you will realize that this is exactly what we've been doing. The colors represent separate districts that are related. The pink is for the school, the brownish is for the state, that we're not covering the state in the course, but in a real tax bill you will see it. The blue is for the county and the green is for the city or municipality. So the first column represents the millage, the number of meals per district. The second column, the assessed value. The third column, the exemptions that apply to this particular property. And the next column represents the taxable value after we subtract the exemptions from the assessed value. When we have the taxable amount, we multiply by the meals and we get the tax. And we will see that in the bill from beginning to end, each district will do the same. At the end, all we have to do is add up the numbers, and if you see at the bottom of the bill, you will see that this homestead property pays $2,133.32 for the year. Now let's look at the next slide. That is exactly the same type of property, because I selected 2 properties that were identical in size and in the same building. And look at the huge difference that we have here on taxes. If you look at the bottom, this property is paying over $8,000 in comparison with the other one that is only paying $2,000. If you look at this bill, you see how high the assessed value it is in comparison to the previous bill. And for this one, we have $385,000, and for the other one, we have only $142,000, right? No exemptions, because this is not a homesteaded property. This is an investment property. And if we don't have any exemptions, what it means is that the assessed value will be equal to the taxable value. So we apply the mills, the tax rate on the full assessed value. So the mills multiplied by the taxable amount is the tax that we have to pay. And at the end, as you can see, it's a lot higher than the other property that was homesteaded. This one is an investment property. So how can this happen? Why is the assessed value of this investment property a lot higher than the assessed value of the homesteaded property? And we will see that in the next slide, slide 16. It's because of the Save Our Homes Act and portability. The Save Our Homes Act and portability is an amendment to the Florida Constitution that limits the increase on the assessed value of our properties for homestead properties only. So basically the property appraiser of the county cannot increase the assessed value of our properties by more than 3% annually, or the consumer price index, whatever is lower. So usually we go by the consumer price index because every year that's, that's below 3. It could be 1.8 to 2.1, 2.2. So that is the cap that the property appraiser will have on a homestead property. The Save Our Homes benefit basically is the difference between the market value. If we look at market value as the regular assessed value minus the homestead assessed value. So the true market value of our property minus the homestead assessed value, which is the value with the cap. That is the benefit that I will accumulate every single year. So why is that important? Because if I sell my homestead and I buy a new homestead property, then I can transfer the benefit that I have accumulated throughout the years to my new homestead. I don't lose it. Not because I sold the property, I lost my benefit. So the only limitation here is that we have 2 years to do that. If I sell my principal residence and I don't buy anything else for a period of 2 years, then I lose my homestead benefit. But if not, if I buy a property within those 2 years, then I can transfer up to $500,000 of my homestead. So we have an example with a real statement in the next slide, slide 17. So if you look at the assessment information at the top on the left, you see that, let's concentrate on year 2018. So we see that the true market value of the property is $216,000. And the assessed value of the property based on the cap that we have every year, it's $145,440. Okay? Now, if you look at the benefit information on the right where it says Save Our Homes cap, you see an assessment reduction of $70,560, and that is exactly the difference between $216,000 minus the $145,440. Okay, so that is the benefit that this homeowner has. So what happens if this homeowner sells the homestead? The homeowner can transfer this $70,000 to the new homestead, and that assessment reduction will apply on the new property. The assessment of the new property could be higher. It doesn't matter. What matters is that this benefit that has been accumulated throughout the years can be transferred to the new property, so we don't have to pay taxes in full. Okay. Right, so that's everything that I have for the homestead exemption. So let's talk about something different. Let's talk about related to taxes anyway, but it's taxes on agricultural land. We call this law the Florida's Green Belt Law. Basically, it was designed to protect farmers. These savings in taxes are based on the fact that this property is agricultural. It's zoned agricultural. So if we change the classification to residential or commercial in the future, because we're going to build on the land, then we lose this benefit. What happens is that because agricultural land is protected and it's meant to protect the farmers, then the taxes paid on agricultural land are a lot lower. It is not based on the highest and best uses of the land, which is a concept that we learned in chapter 16 when we were learning about appraisal and the highest and best use of a property. It's based on the fact that the land is agricultural. Every single year, the property needs to be reclassified as agricultural to continue enjoying the benefits of low taxes. What happens many times is that developers, speculators, when they see urban growth in the surrounding areas of a tract of land, they buy the land and they keep it agricultural for a few years until they are ready to develop something. That is why if you've seen this in many places in Florida, and we have a case here in Miami. If you go in the Miami-Dade County, if you go to the city of Doral and you see all those open spaces and you see the cows, have you seen that? Many cows in the middle of the city, and you say, why are these cows here? Well, because these future developers are keeping the land agricultural, and that is one way to keep the reclassification going for a few years, and so they don't have to pay high taxes on this land. Okay, next slide. Slide 19. Special assessments. Special assessments are it's a one-time tax that we pay through the tax bill. It's not based on ad valorem. It's basically for public improvements. Maybe street repaving, maybe sewer lines that will be connected, and we will, if we are homeowners, we will see the benefits of that improvement. That's why we have to pay taxes on the improvement. This is a superior tax lien, and it has priority over all other liens, just like the property taxes. And the special assessments have priority over every single lien out there. So if the property is foreclosed for some reason, then the government gets paid first. Property taxes and unpaid special assessments. It is not an ad valorem, as we mentioned. It is levied on the front foot basis for street repaving, or the per hookup basis if we are connecting sewer lines. In the next slide, we're gonna see an example of how to calculate a special assessment. And learn this formula. It's very simple, by the way. It's easy to understand, but learn it and make sure that you remember to study this, because this could be a math question in the test. They usually don't ask you about the connection of the sewer lines, but they usually ask these questions regarding street repaving. They will give you in the question the area of the lot, the measurements of the lot. The other thing that they will give you is how much of the total cost to repave the streets the city will pay, and how much of this total cost will be your responsibility and your neighbors. Because if we are repaving a street, we have to pay a portion of that assessment, and the neighbor across from your home has to pay the other half, okay? So let's look at the formula and how to calculate this. The front feet of your lot is what you care about. You don't care about the full measurement of your lot. You only care about the front, okay? The linear feet on your front. So you take the front feet of your lot and you multiply that by the cost per linear foot. This is going to be given to you in the test. They're gonna give you maybe the lot measurements. In the example that you have here on the slide, you can see 120 feet by 325 feet. What number do I choose? You choose the first one because that represents the front of your home, okay? Then they tell you that the government will pay, in this case, 33% of the total cost. And they will also tell you the price per square foot to pave the road. So all you have to do is, if the city is paying 33% of the 100% of the total cost, you subtract the 33% and you and your neighbor will have to cover the remaining 67%. You take the front feet of your lot. In this example is 120 feet. You multiply that by the cost per linear foot and you come up with the total cost of the work. In this case it's 120 front feet multiplied by $25. That gives you $3,000 as total cost. We said that the city will cover 33. We're responsible for the other 67%. So we multiply 3,000, which is the total cost, by the 67%, and the cost that you have to share with your neighbor is $2,010 according to this example. At the end, you always have to remember to divide by 2, because if you don't remember to divide by 2, you're gonna get the wrong answer. So it's divided by 2 because half of the work will be your responsibility and the other half will be your responsibility of the neighbor. So that is all I had for you regarding special assessments. Now let's talk about something different, the non-payment of the real estate taxes. Non-payment of real estate taxes, it's a big problem for the homeowners or the investors in this country because you know that the government can take your property if you don't pay your taxes. Because property taxes is a superior lien and they will force you to sell the property to pay for the taxes. But before that happens, there is an additional process or something that happens before they take the property to auction in a tax sale. The first thing that they will do is look at the delinquent taxes, and you become delinquent, by the way, on April 1st. That is part of the tax schedule. If by April 1st you have not paid your taxes yet, you are already delinquent. So remember that the taxes become payable on the 1st of November. You have from November 1st until the last day of March to pay your taxes. If you pay it in advance in November, they're gonna give you a 4% discount. If you pay in December, 3% discount, January 2%, February 1%, March, you don't have any discounts, but you are already still current on your taxes. But if you wait until April 1st, you're already delinquent. And the government will put a lien on your property. So you can pay your taxes maybe during April, May, and June, plus all the interest, because if you don't pay your taxes and you're delinquent, you will have to start paying interest to the government as well. You have up until June to be current on your taxes. If you pay the taxes, plus the tax collector, the tax collector's commissions, the newspaper advertising, and the internet tax certificate sales fee. So what are all these fees for, and why do we have to pay all of that? We have to pay all of that because they sell a tax certificate, and that's usually something that happens during May or June on your property. They issue a tax certificate that can be purchased by investors. One is the face amount of the certificate, the taxes that you owe on that specific property. Because remember, what the government cares about is to receive those taxes. If no one pays taxes, they won't have money to fund the government operations. So the tax certificate is issued and it's advertised. At some point during May and June, a list will be advertised in the newspapers. And that is the way that the homeowners will know that the tax certificate process will start on their property. Of course, that means expenses for the government. To advertise the tax certificate sale, that means that they have to publish in the newspaper. There will be an additional commission for all the work that they have to undertake because of this, because of the fact that you haven't paid your taxes. And usually these tax certificates nowadays are sold on the internet, so they also have to incur on internet cost. So all of this happens so someone else can buy a certificate which we know already has a face amount of the taxes that you owe plus all the other expenses. Okay? Now, if you are in a tax sale certificate, how do you bid? Because this is like an auction. We're auctioning tax certificates. Who will get the certificate? It's not based on a bid on a dollar amount. It's based on an interest. The maximum interest on a tax certificate could be up to 18%. If someone is willing to take a lower interest rate, the tax certificate will go to the lowest bidder. So if you, for example, we have an individual number one, and he wants 15% on the tax certificate, and we have individual number two that is happy to accept 10% on the certificate, the certificate will go to the individual that is willing to accept a lower interest rate on the money that he has invested with the government through this certificate. Because for the government is to recover those taxes that you haven't paid, but for the individual, he's an investor. Instead of putting the money in a bank to earn maybe a 1 or 2% a year, they prefer to invest the money with the government, and if they buy these certificates, they can see up to an 18% interest rate on them. Okay. There is something that the owners can do to stop the foreclosure sale, because now we are only during the tax certificate sale. If before 2 years have passed after the investor purchased this certificate from the government to pay for your taxes, if you are delinquent, if at some point during these two years the owner of the property comes up with the full amount of the taxes plus all the expenses that have been paid, he can redeem the certificate, and he will have to write a check to the government to pay for all the taxes, and the government will write a check to the individual that is the certificate holder to compensate for all the investment made plus the interest earned up to that date. The tax deed process, this is the last thing that happens during the tax certificate process. At the end of the 2 years, if the property owner has not paid the taxes, the holder of the certificate can apply for a tax deed. A tax deed is basically what he will get at the auction, at the sale of the property. You can apply for a tax deed anytime after the 2 years. The 2 years have passed after the purchase of the certificate, but always before 7 years. That will be the statute of limitations. Okay, you have to wait 2 years after you purchase the certificate if you are the investor. And but if you don't apply during the 7 years, then the certificate will expire. So what happens after the application? The government will take the property to auction, to a tax sale, but it doesn't mean that because you hold the certificate, the property will go to you. We start bidding again. In this case, we bid in dollar amounts, and the individual, the investor that pays the highest amount for the property will keep the property. If no one bids and the property is not sold, the tax deed will go to the investor who purchased the certificate, and all the liens on the property will be cleared. So the individual will be receiving a tax deed, free and clean of any type of liens. So for investors, this is a multi-million-dollar market out there. Investors are after these tax certificates and these tax deeds all the time. So if you want to learn this, you can take additional courses. What I'm giving you is the summary of what the process is all about.